Was the war on drugs enacted to stop crime, or was it put in place to keep the offenders off the streets and without the health care they needed to get better? Those criminals, citizens of the United States, are sitting alone in their dark, hollow jail cells. They have nothing to live for or hope for, except the day that they can look in the mirror, ashamed of who they became, hollow and insignificant citizens of America. American Indians are 71% more likely to report an offender was under the influence of alcohol and or drugs at the time of a violent crimes incident, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics. In the case where substance use was known, 48% of the offenders were under the influence of alcohol, 9% of the offenders were under the influence of drugs, and 14% of the offenders were under the influence of both alcohol and drugs. More than 4/5 of drug law violation arrests are for possession, according to Bureau of Justice Statistics. Possession arrests have been increasing steadily since 1992, while sales and manufacture arrests have stayed the same. Drug arrests were 7.4% total of all arrests in 1987, and in 2007, drug arrests rose up to 13%. What that means is that more people are getting arrested for possession than people who are supplying and trafficking the drugs. The drug dealers are who law enforcement should be targeting. The Harrison Narcotics Tax Act went into effect March 1st, 1915. The act issued a tax on whoever was to manufacture, import, produce, distribute, or sell opium, also known as cocoa leaves. This also applied to doctors who could prescribe narcotics to their patients for treatment. It does not include patients who are suffering from addiction. Alcohol prohibition began in 1919. According to the law, no person could sell, import, or export any intoxicating beverages. The result was bootleggers lined the streets, people started brewing moonshine at home, gangs formed to distribute the alcohol to the rich, and private clubs such as speakeasies. This was the beginning of organized crime. Alcohol became legal again in 1933. Marijuana Stamp Act of 1937. Harry Anslinger, Federal Bureau of Narcotics Commissioner, voiced a campaign which led to the passage of the Marijuana Stamp Act, according to DPS. Under the act, marijuana was regulated in terms of distribution, cultivation, possession. In other words, recreational use was prohibited. Comparable to what we are seeing now, recreational and medicinal sales in Colorado and other states. However, in 1970, marijuana, like narcotics, became outlawed. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, also known as the time the war on drugs began. This act enabled longer jail sentence time for drugs, including marijuana, cocaine, and crack cocaine alike. In Section 6293 of this act, it states, Attorney General shall study the feasibility of prosecuting federal drug-related offenses in a matter alternative or supplemental to the current criminal justice system. Former CIA member Bill Cooper suggests that this act was the beginning of a police state. Cooper wrote a book called Behold a Pale Horse about the top secret government files kept from the public since the 1940s. The rich have their cellars full, but the working man, accustomed to his glass of beer with his noonday lunch, has to go without, wrote an editor in a Leslie's Weekly newspaper dating back to 1922. The editor claimed that drinking had increased due to Prohibition. The rich brewed their own wine, beer, and liquor at home, which was an increase in alcohol content up to 50%. In comparing the war on drugs and the war on alcohol, a reporter of the Toronto Star wrote, "They went on escalating the war against alcohol until the very day Congress repealed Prohibition." She writes that the same goes for the drug war, which was dormant in America until the 1970s. The criminal empire that was created in response to alcohol prohibition faded away, and then it came back with a concentration in different areas: drugs, marijuana, heroin, cocaine. Back in 1988, this reporter claimed that the drug war was already lost, as it is now in 2016, still lost. She wrote, "There is a vast industry supplying the banned drugs and another industry combating it. The two together involve an annual turnover of money equal to about half the U.S. defense budget. Alcohol kills 80,000 to 100,000 people per year in the U.S. alone. In 1987, 3,562 Americans died from cocaine, but alcohol isn't illegal." Professor Ethan Nettleman of Princeton University claimed that the drug war corrupted Latin American countries, put killers on streets, and crowded jails with criminals arrested for possession. Bottom line, the drug war has been lost since it began. UN members are expected to meet April 2016 to discuss the global impacts of the war on drugs, according to a Vice News article published last month. Nixon was a known racist, and although he used the war on drugs to ensure minorities had less power, he didn't invent what is known as the racist war on drugs. Old American drug laws did, dating back to 1914. Those drug laws were aimed at immigrants, those more vulnerable and more susceptible to having addiction and mental problems. In other words, the less fortunate. Back in the 1930s, head of U.S. Narcotics Bureau, Harry Anslinger, said that the people who smoked marijuana were mostly Negroes, Hispanics, and entertainers of satanic music. Statistics show that the war on drugs presently targets black people, mainly for possession. In the UK, that minority group is 3 times more likely than whites to be stopped and searched, as is the case in the U.S. Later in the article, the reporter writes about Don Dolan's claim that people who are arrested aren't drug kingpins, but rather expendable drug carriers, ones who suffer from an economic disadvantage. Political leaders have come out and admitted to the failure of the drug war, but are not known to do it while in office because they can't speak out without being fired. The drug war is a failure in itself. The first and only country to decriminalize all drugs was Portugal, 16 years ago. Portuguese official João Gallo tells Vice about Portugal's decriminalization success. Instead of getting arrested, drug offenders receive a citation. Drugs are still illegal, though traffickers and dealers still go to jail. The drug offenders must appear before a dissuasion panel. If an offender is caught multiple times with drugs, and if they appear to be addicts, they must go to counseling and receive opiate treatment. If they refuse treatment or counseling, the offender will be fined. As a result, HIV infections declined from 1,016 cases in 2001 to 56 cases in 2012. This is due to the needle exchange programs that have prevented diseases from spreading. The number of users have decreased as well. There is an estimate of 50,000 users now, with most under substitution opiate treatment. Police also work with family doctors to make sure that the addict is getting better with treatment, which is opposite of the U.S. The criminalization plus harm reduction equals human rights. Countries that follow Portugal's model are asked to look at addiction as a health issue, not a criminal issue.
Lay in the middle of the psalm and started thinking mentally where that smell was coming from. His eyes scanned every pew, and then he did declare, he says, I announced this meeting fool. until you kick in with my share. Oh, Reverend, if you want more preaching, save a little dram for me. Glory, hallelujah, why drinking gin ain't against my teaching. Treat me with equality. From this here smell is very plain to see that somebody here's been holding out on me. Oh, Reverend, if you want more preaching, save a little dram for me. Now, when they passed the bone dry law, I was the very first to say that it never would stay. And neither did I think the law could regulate our faith. That's why I got none stored away. Now, since Prohibition's got us, drinks is few and far between. Of all the stingy brothers, you're the worst I've ever seen. But I insist on my share. Don't say it's all run out.